everybody, it's Nate Dog here. We're back with Ed the Caver, part 2. I don't know how many parts this is going to be because it's a fairly extensive creepypasta, but I'll leave the link in the description. The way he has it broken down is journal entries, but then he has like reflections of the journals afterwards. So I'm mainly just going to be going over all of his journal entries, so if you guys want to check out his afterthoughts after all of this, you can, but I'm just going to stick with the journal entries to keep everything kind of in order. Alright, so the next journal entry, February 10th, 2001. Scarcely 2 weeks had gone by, and already we were on our way back out to work in the cave. We admit we had become obsessed with the idea of getting through the passage. That may be a sign of how exciting our lives really are. It's not what we think that there's something in the great beyond of the passage. We just like the idea of being the first humans on the face of the planet to set foot in a virgin part of the cave. Although, if we found a hidden treasure, that would be fine with us. Got a late start and drove partway in the dark. When I tell people that I go caving at night, they wonder why. They don't stop to think that it's always night once you're inside of a cave. All the way to the mystery cave, we talked about the new ideas to speed up our work. He also told me that he talked to some caver friends of his, came up with an explanation about the rumbling. They thought it might be the sound of deep water within the cave, possibly a waterfall. They couldn't really explain why the noise seemed to come and go to me. It's one of those, it's just one more reason to solve the mystery. This trip we took B's dog, Whip. He is a Jack Russell Terrier. I was not at all concerned about taking a dog into the cave. We have taken her before. She answers the call of nature before we go in, and then waits until we go out again. Also, she's well behaved inside the cave. Simply had to lower her custom-made harness until she reached the bottom of the main dropper. Then she negotiated the rest on her own. She loves to explore, but won't go out of our sight. She doesn't have a light attached to her, so she has to wait for us. Another reason I didn't mind bringing Whip along was because we had planned on putting her into the small hole to see how far into the passage she would go. That might give us an idea of what it's like on the other side. We knew that if we were a drop-off that we couldn't see, the dog would turn around and come right back to us. We thought we might have to go do some work on the hole before even the dog could get through. Despite working in the dark of the night, we were able to rig up and get down pretty quickly. We didn't take as many tools as last time, plus we left some in the hole. Wouldn't have to haul them back in and out again. I did manage to get 2 more batteries for the drill for a total of 4. Also a few more masonry drill bits. Even with the dog, we made good time getting down, and something bizarre happened I can't quite explain. The dog began exploring as soon as we let her off her rope. She was in dog heaven, sniffing and darting around our feet. She would run from one person to the other as we made our way back to the work site. At the point the cave splits into 4 passages, the dog seemed to run out of juice. She just stuck by either B or me. That seemed kind of odd. As we progressed further into the cave, she would only stay by B. She seemed edgy, like she saw something she didn't like. As we approached the sort of drop-off before the hole, she stopped and would only come further after we coaxed her. The hair on her back stood on end. Finally, as we got within 20 feet of the hole, she began to whimper and hide behind B. Tail was between her legs and she was cowering down on the ground. Strange. I have seen her square off with dogs twice her size, but now she's acts of Satan himself was lurking in the darkness. I figured there must have been some animals that used the cave as home, and Whip smelled their scent. Too bad it upset her because there was no way she was going into the passage. We decided with this new development, the nervous dog, one of us would work while the other stayed with the dog, a few feet away from where we normally rested. Got right back into our routine of drilling, hammering, etc. With our extra supply batteries, we were able to really push hard on the drill and not have to worry about using up the batteries. This did not make our work any easier, but it did speed things up a little bit. Progress was still really didn't mind. We were on our fourth battery when the second bizarre thing happened to us in B. B was working. He had just finished drilling a hole and was getting ready to hammer the bullpen when he stopped working. I was kicking back, almost asleep and hardly paying attention to B. He had a light by his side to illuminate the work area. I could see in the eerie glow of a puzzled and intense look on his face. He looked over at me and shook his head. I asked him what was up. He said he swore he just heard a strange noise emanating from the hole. He said it sounded like rocks sliding on rock, sort of a grinding sound. I assume his ears were just ringing from the drill. He didn't wear any earplugs this time. He assured me that what he said he heard. I didn't have an explanation, so I went back to dozing. He sat in a quiet cave for a long time before he resumed work. Also, he would stop from time to time just to listen. He is very grounded and not one to pursue some imaginary sound. I believe he heard something, but I'm not too concerned about what it was. I assume we will figure it all out once we get through the passage. The final battery lasted another hour or so. We were sitting around talking about our progress when I decided to see if I could get my head through them. My head easily fit, but there was no way my shoulders were going in. As I was kneeling there, contemplating how close we were, I noticed something that B overlooked. The wind had stopped. And all the times that I've been in the cave, I've always felt the wind blowing. Last time we were out working on the cave, the wind was blowing worse than ever. Even earlier, we remembered the breeze cooling us off, but now nothing. B said he did not know when it stopped. Rumbling had ceased too. Bizarre. Plain old cave was becoming mysterious. We talked for a long time in the dark of the cave. We debated what could possibly be causing these. I think part of the reason we were sitting in the dark was because we were both too hammered to move. We'd come up with no reasonable explanation for things happening in the cave. After sitting for at least a half an hour, we slowly loaded up our gear and started for the surface. Whip couldn't have been happier to get out of it. Once again, we left some of the tools in the cave. We just put them in the hole, not enough for people to use the cave to worry about it. Plus, we were too tired to care. We made a lot of progress on this trip. It helps to have an extra batteries. Still have a long way to go, but it sure is nice to see how far we've come. March 3rd through the 4th, 2001. It took us 3 weeks before we got back to the mystery cave again. Our attitudes had changed a bit since we started the project. In the beginning, we looked at the whole thing as a fun adventure. Since the last trip out, we found ourselves taking a more serious approach. On the drive out this time, our conversation was a little more subdued than before. We hadn't talked much this last trip, not for any reason, scheduling conflicts. Instead of discussing ways to get through the passage, we found ourselves talking about rational explanations for what had happened. Neither one of us had any ideas that would explain the unusual occurrences we experienced on the last trip. We were amused to find that neither one of us had talked much about the last trip to other people. This is a complete reversal from our other trips. It had been fun to report to friends and family about our progress. It is always fun to tell people about the tight squeeze we're going to have to go through, get into the passage. Most people have little desire to voluntarily subject themselves to incredibly tight places. Actually, neither do I, but I'll do it in order to get to the other side. Good motivation. We left town early in the afternoon to beat the traffic. I don't really recall what time we finally got to the cave. Like I said, the mood was subdued when we got rigged up and started down. Obviously, we left the dog home this time. We took essentially the same gear as last time. We left some of the tools in the hole to save our backs the agony of hauling the extra weight. Even with the gear, we got down in good time. We really had a good system for getting up and down. There was only one minor mishap this trip. B scraped his arm in the descent. Not real bad, fortunately. We waited until we got all the way to the hole to patch it up. It was just a superficial cut. While he was getting the wound cleaned up, I started working. We both took note that the breeze was back and the rumbling was present. We had 4 fresh batteries and 4 or maybe 3.5 fresh arms. I had high hopes that this would be the day. It started out pretty slow. When we first started working on the hole, the thickness was about 3 inches. As we've enlarged the hole, the thickness has increased. As a result, our progress has become even slower. Still, we continued with as much energy as we could put into the work. The hole was big enough, at least for me, to put the hammer into the hole for reference, then put the camera into the hole to take pictures of Floyd's tomb. It had been nice to see the pile of broken rock below our hole get bigger and bigger. We both realized that we were just going to have to put in a certain amount of work in order to get through, so we'd just get down to business. We don't usually talk much while working, since one of us is making a lot of noise with the drill or the hammer. Break times are used to chat momentarily about whatever topic pops into mind. The breaks take place whenever the guy that's working decides to switch roles. We both put in some pretty good work sessions. I have a little more stamina than B, but he gets just as much done in a shorter amount of time due to his upper body strength. We still celebrate the small victories we encounter along the way. Whenever a section we've been working on crumbles, we cheer. On the rare occasion that a fist-sized rock falls from the entrance, we whoop and holler. That's one small chunk of earth that no longer separates us from whatever lies on the other side. I still harbor the fantasy that there is a hidden entrance to the other side of the passage, and years ago, Spanish explorers hid their treasures in a cave and sealed up the entrance, and it has remained untouched until we find it. B has a more realistic, although more mundane theory. He figures there's more cave on the other side. We'll see who's right. This trip out, I wanted to see if we could speed up work by using larger masonry bits. I purchased some good sized ones from a hardware store. One was larger in diameter than all the rest, the other was smaller around but longer. I had pretty much concluded that the big one might be too big, and I was right. We tried to get it to go into the rock, but progress was very slow. Tried pushing for all we were worth, and all we got was tired. The larger bit just created too much friction in the area for our strength. It might have worked with a hammer drill, but we didn't have one. The longer bit worked fine with our drill. We relied on it for most of the work that we did this trip. I thought we were going to be out one bit and a drill in my hand. When the bit broke off toward the end, I was pushing as hard as I could possibly on the drill, with the bit a few inches in the wall, when it snapped. I nearly rammed the drill through the wall from pushing it so hard. We were able to retrieve the bit and keep using it, minus the couple of inches. It still worked great. Only once in a great while did we resort to the hammer and chisel. Work was proceeding as normal until about the time we were on our 4th battery. I was kneeling down and working the drill slowly into the wall at the time. I had my earplugs in, my safety glasses on, and was lost in my own thoughts. Suddenly, over the squeal of the drill wearing down the rock, I heard a strange noise. It was loud. I could hear it over the noise of the drill, even though I had earplugs in. At first, I thought it was just the drill bit doing its job on the cave. It would frequently complain by screeching and whining as it was forced into the wall. But this was different. It took me several full seconds to comprehend that this was coming from inside the hole, and not the bit. I stopped drilling and yanked my earplugs out just in time to hear the most terrible scream I have ever heard. trail off the echo of the darkness of the cavern. I stared wide-eyed at the hole for several moments. I didn't move, nor did I breathe. I turned to look at B. Moments earlier, he had been lying the rope bag, catching a nap. Now he was standing upright, mouth open, with a look of concern on his face. I turned and looked into the hole again, half expecting to see a demon face staring back at me. Nothing was different in Floyd's tomb. I fixed my gaze on the back of the squeeze where the limits of my light reached. There was no motion, only darkness. Beyond the reaches of my light, in the complete silence that followed, I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. Not another sound could be heard in the cave. Suddenly I heard a scraping noise behind me and straightened up. I nearly knocked myself out, hitting my head on the overhang. It was just B moving to turn on his light, but it was just so weird that it nearly sent me to the grave. He spoke, and again I jumped. He said to get some rocks and put them in the hole. He explained that whatever animal had made that noise might be able to get through the hole, and I immediately grabbed a few rocks and hoisted them through the opening, using the handles of the sledgehammer. I slid the rocks as far back into the tunnel as I could reach, creating a wall between us and the other side. Since the squeeze is so small, it didn't take long. The entire time I was doing this, however, I was thinking that the noise certainly did not come from an animal. I didn't know if B really thought it was, or if he was just trying to convince himself. I didn't say anything about what I thought. After I filled the back of the passage with rocks, we just sat there, listening to the silence. My breathing was a lot more rapid. Neither of us spoke for quite some time. Finally, he suggested we get back to work. We'll keep an eye out for movement in the hole. Put a light in the passage and shined it to the back of Floyd's tomb. It was only at this point that we realized the wind had stopped again, and the rumbling could no longer be heard. To say I was nervous would be an understatement. I didn't say anything to B, nor him to me. Back to the drilling. B took over the work, which was fine with me. I wasn't exactly worn out, but I didn't mind being further from the hole. B would stop from time to time and listen. I just sat, watching him, with my light on. I wasn't close to the entrance of the hole, but I still found myself looking behind me, down the passage to the still water. Every time my light would cast an unusual shadow, my heart would jump. My imagination was running wild. Oddly, B seemed less concerned about the strange noise than me. After a short time, he seemed to be focused entirely on getting through the passage. I was still straining to listen above the sound of the drill. I heard nothing but the now familiar sound of carbide on stone. As I contemplated the possible scenarios which might play out on the other side of the passage, I found myself strangely getting somewhat excited again about getting through. It might have been fatigue taking its toll on my mind, or the thought of something valuable inside. My thoughts were broken when B let out a yell, possibly a curse word. He said the drill battery was dying, but he hadn't quite broken off a large relative section he was working on. He set the useless drill aside and picked up the hammer and bullpen and started wailing away at the hole created by the bit. After nearly 10 solid minutes of hammering, he sat back, the rock sweating and nearly out of breath. The bullpen was still protruding from the cave floor. He held the hammer towards me, inviting me to take a few swings. I held my hand up and shook my head. I had been ready to exit this cave for quite a while now. He didn't press the issue, and without speaking, we both started gathering the gear we were going to take out. Once again, we stashed some of the passage. I was the first to start towards the top of the cave. Several times I had to stop and wait for him. Not because he was moving slow, I was just more than eager to get out. A few times have I felt that night stepping out into the chilly air. I've never felt better. Alright, well, that's where I'm going to end part 2, and there's probably going to be at least a couple more parts to this, but so far, I mean, we've learned that the cave is acting very abnormal for a cave. Rumbling sounds and wind seem to be coming and going, and then obviously a really loud scream, so I'm kind of interested to see, even more so than the last episode, what's on the other side of the cave. Like and subscribe for more. Thank you for watching.